full house. All right. Welcome, everyone. Quite a big meetup this time. I think we were fully booked, so 40 people. I'm not sure if everyone showed up, but we will see who didn't and chase them for next time. So we're trying to get as much people as possible to the meetups. So that also means making sure that your attendance is set up correctly in Meetup. So that's why we're kindly asking to update if you're not coming. So please, in the future, if you already signed up but decided that it's not possible to join anymore, please update your Meetup attendance so other people who are on the waiting list can still join. So on that note, we've had a lot of new members. So for this meetup alone, there were 20 new members joining for the first time, which is quite nice. And that number is, I think, always around the same. So every time we do a new meetup, it's around 20 people who joined for the first time, which is nice. So we aim to bring actually the Flutter community together by sharing knowledge and making sure that everyone who is interested in a network can learn something and bringing people together, actually. So Chris actually started in 2018, organizing meetups at several companies, and then Jens, who is behind the laptop, and I joined, I think, 1.5 years or 2 years ago already to streamline it a bit and making sure that Chris doesn't have to do all the work. So we have some social network channels where you can follow us and gather the new meetup data. We also have a YouTube page because we're doing a live stream every meetup. We always try to improve the live stream, so you can always revisit it. It's quite nice, so you can use it for when you actually go to a new company or something, you can share it and tell what your experience is. For example, we also have a Slack group. Most of you, I think, are already in the Slack group. But yeah, we're actually sharing some tips and tricks there, some interesting links, the latest Flutter versions who get released. That's something we all share mostly there. And then on LinkedIn, we usually just share updates around everything that we're doing. We also have a Flutter Belgium app. It's quite small currently, but we're trying to improve it this year by adding new features and rewatching the live stream, for example. We also have a raffle every meetup, so we give away t-shirts and a dash, so a fluffy dash. You can join the raffle by scanning the QR code on the banners here and there. It's linked to installing the application, and then you can sign up for the raffle. We're doing that at the end of every meetup with everyone who registered. So if you want to win something tonight, register. But if you want to become a speaker, we're always looking for speakers. So I think actually we think that everyone has something interesting to say. It doesn't matter if it's if you're just starting out with Flutter or if you have years of experience. It's always interesting to learn what other people learned during their process of tinkering around with Flutter. We have some certain topics we're still looking for speakers for, which is Flutter for Web, which is App in App, and Full Stack, which is Brent. Brent is going to give a talk on that today, so quite nice. So if you have a topic that you want to share, just reach out to one of us and we'll make it happen. Yeah, indeed. We also saw that most of the other meetup groups are using Sessionized, which is a platform where you can say I have a talk that I want to give, and you can share it with a company who is looking for speakers. It's used, for example, by the FlutterCon, I think. So it's quite known in the public speaking industry. So we will try to use it and see what it does. If you just want to give a talk and come to us, it's fine as well. But we will promote the Sessionize on our socials as well. We're trying to gather also international speakers to get some other perspective. So it's easier to gain traction in that case as well. If you want to host, or if the company you're working for wants to host, we're also always looking for new locations. I think we've been booked until October now, so it's quite all right, but always nice to see new companies who want to join or want to host. So don't hesitate to reach out. So for today, we have 3 lightning talks. Lightning talk is just something where you can talk for 5 or 7 minutes about a topic that you like. If you don't want to give a full length of a talk, it's quite easy or easier to start with and to share knowledge with other people. So Jens will give a talk about Widget of the Meetup, which is a series we're trying to start. If for the next meetup someone else has a widget of the meetup, also just reach out or say, I want to do the lightning talk for widget of the meetup, which is quite a funny and I think a nice topic to address. Then Johan is doing a lightning talk on hosting. Is your hosting for my mobile app enterprise ready? We'll see what it is. I don't know, but we'll see. And then William did some nice stuff on a fancy fortune wheel, which is used in the raffle application. So we'll see how he did it and where he used shaders. So we'll see about that. And then for the big program, it's Romain who created the CLI for creating production-ready applications in 20 minutes. It's quite fast, so we'll see how it does it. And I don't know where he is actually. Okay. We'll see how he does it. He already gave a lightning talk 2 meetups ago, I think, and I think it's quite interesting. And then Brent, who will give a talk about full stack with Dart, because you can indeed use Dart also on backend as well. So if you want to join the raffle, this is the QR code as well. But we also have a break during the talks, so you can scan the QR code. And then I'm not sure if A.C.A wants to say something still.
I was planning to do so.
Okay, perfect. But of course, we want to thank A.C.A Group for hosting, for the pizzas, for the drinks. So yeah, really nice that you want to host and want to provide us with some comfort food. Then the next meetup is somewhere where we've never been. It's in Kortrijk at Get Driven. They've been using Flutter for, I think, 4 or 5 years already. They've also used it for their web application. So quite an interesting host, and really nice to see a product company who also uses Flutter internally.
The date is wrong, it's the 2nd of April.
Ah, yeah, indeed.
Just FYI.
And then let's start with the lightning talks.
Oei, Chris, waar is mijn talk? Ja, doe maar. Ja. Okay, ready? Nope. Yeah, nice. Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I've actually already given this lightning talk once at the special event we did at the end of last year for Flutter in production. But I really want to kind of launch this idea within the group and have it be a repeating event. And since that was a very, very small event, I think there was 6 or 7 people only, I'm going to give it again. So if you've heard it before, I do apologize. What I'd like to talk about is this is something that the Flutter team does. I think most of us know, those who don't, the Flutter team has a series on YouTube where they post videos. They're called Widget of the Week, where they highlight a widget in the Flutter framework, maybe because it's new or because they think it's undervalued, or they want to give some extra explanation about it. And they're like very short, sweet, 1-minute videos where they quickly explain how the widget works and how you can use it in your project. And what I would like to introduce is Widget of the Meetup, where we do a similar thing, but we do it in a lightning talk. So you take a widget that maybe was useful in a project that you did recently, or you think is undervalued, or you found somewhere deep in the framework and you want to give some extra attention because you think it's useful. I think that could be nice to have like a recurring thing going with Widget of the Meetup. And what I would like to talk about this meetup is baseline. Because recently I was working on a project and I had the following issue. And yeah, the title of the talk is baseline, so you might already see quite clearly what the issue is. It's this. Inside these fill objects, the text is not vertically centered. It's not correct. And inspecting these widgets, it became quite clear that from Flutter's perspective, the positioning was actually correct. But there's an extra margin in the font itself, underneath the glyphs of the font, which caused this error. And I've encountered this quite a few times now, I think 3 times in total, and we've solved it in different ways each time that we've had it. I think one time we had the designer actually move the glyphs down inside of the font, and we used that new font file in the project to solve it. Another time we just used a different font because yeah, it didn't work. But for this project, yeah, we had to use this font, so I figured, can I solve this with Flutter? And in order to solve a problem, you first have to understand the problem. And to understand the problem, you need to understand how vertical positioning works in Flutter. And in Flutter, vertical positioning is always a function of the widget's top and its height. And that's used to determine where the widget is positioned vertically. Now, from Flutter's perspective, this is correct because the widget itself, it's taken its height, it's taken the function, it's positioned correctly, but we have this awkward space at the bottom which causes it to be offset slightly. So how can we solve this with baseline? How would that work? So what baseline does is it allows you to set the text baseline property to text baseline.alphabetic. And what that does is it takes the baseline of your font and your text widget, and then it positions that baseline a specified amount of pixels from the top of the baseline widget. So what that looks like is you have your letter, your font in the baseline widget. It takes the baseline and then it positions it from the top of the baseline widget. So if you would want to do normal positioning of a text widget within a baseline widget, that amount of pixels that you specify would be your font size. And then you would have a normally positioned text widget inside of a baseline widget. But as you know, we don't have this scenario. We don't have a nicely aligned font. We have this scenario. But because you're specifying the amount of pixels that it needs to be moved down, you can basically just add that extra margin that you have and move it down a little bit more to correct that error that you have. So how did I implement this? Baseline itself is super easy to implement. It takes 3 parameters. There's not a lot going on there. But what I noticed in all 3 of these scenarios that I've had, these fonts that have these extra spaces under their glyphs, is that space, it also sizes up if your font size sizes up. So that means that you can basically calculate what is the ratio of that space against the font size, and you can correct that, and you can basically add like a correction percentage to it, and then automatically correct it based on the font size. So that's what I did. So that you have this baseline corrected text widget. It takes in a correction percentage, and here it defaults to 12.5% because that's what I needed for this project with this font. That's why it's 12.5%. And then on the baseline, you can see that I take the font size, and then I add the font size with that correction percentage to it, which results in this. So you have the pills on the left before with the incorrect text, and then on the right, the fixed version where it's moved down a little bit. That's it. Thank you. So if you want to do a widget of the meetup in one of the following meetups, reach out, submit a lightning talk, and then we can schedule that. Dit is voor u.
Nice. All right. Hello. My name is William. I work at A.C.A, and I usually do this kind of thing, giving a lightning talk. So I made a special visual using shaders, and to prove it's shaders, I added this very nice effect. Look, look. You can control it. So it's not just a movie. If we look at the previous meetups, we've always had a raffle. I was never satisfied with how it looked, and the first time, the first meetup I joined, I thought I'm gonna fix this, and then maybe I can tweak the winner a little bit. But that meetup, I won my dash, so it never happened. But now I've had some time. So I've made this fortune wheel, and Koen immediately said, yeah, let's do a lightning talk about this. So I'm quickly gonna go through it. I'm gonna speed up a little bit to get the lightning talk done as fast as possible. So what we want to do here is have like segments. At this point we've got 4 segments, but it has to be dynamic, of course. We don't know how many people joined the raffle. We need to have a flipper, so we need to have an arrow or something there, a nice visual pleasing center, a cool curve, more on that later, and of course we have to add a shader. So first things first, the frame, it's easy. You just draw 2 circles, have an oval clipper so nothing draws outside of it. And I actually decided to use a size box of 800 and then use a fitted box around it. So I didn't have to think about ratios or scaling or whatever. Everything is in, for me, 800 by 800, and I can decide the sizes by that. To get the lines, it's just a horizontal line. I've done an align right with a width of 0.5, so you can specify your width fragment stuff, so it's only on the right side. Then do a rotation based on the children, length times I times pi. I just draw a canvas with 1 pixel width and draw a dot on the end. The next step is a little bit more complicated. It's the actual segment itself. I've used a custom clipper for this, so that the rotation is kind of the same. You just do 2 pi divided by how many children you have, in this case 4. I do it minus a little bit, so it's more tilted for the arrow later on. And then I do an arc 2. It didn't work how I thought it would, but having a big radius solved my issue. Yeah, I don't know why that worked, but if you lower this value, you'll see that these lines won't match up. And this is dynamic, so if you have more than 4, it will work as well. And then the flipper itself, I just draw 2 circles, 1 in the center, 1 here, and I connect the top and the bottom. And then my wife said, hey, dat beweegt niet, it's not moving. So I just had to figure out how can we move this with each passing thing. So I have here a nice switch expression based on my angle. So I take the angle of the wheel, I times it by how many children we have, so we know how far we are. Then I do some correction, so it's not going too wild. And then I animate it based on that value. If it's going past that, then we invert it. And if it's lower or higher than that, we just return 0. And then to get this nice outline, I just fill it with white, and then I add the outline, so it's not that hard. The center, obviously not just a static thing, I want it to be dynamic, and then set it to always be 5. But yeah, it's just a combination of quadratic Béziers, and here the arc did work how I thought it would. And then just rotate it. And then we have a fully functional wheel, but it's not just quite there yet. So I wanted a nice curve, and the curve is actually driving your animation. So you have the basics, you have the ease in out that starts slow, speeds up, and then goes slow again. But here we want something representing something physical, so we want more physics-like behavior. So what we actually want is to speed it up fast, and then slow down, slow down, slow down, and then stop. And then I discovered the website cubicbezier.com. You can actually play around with it. You get those 4 values, and you can just plug them into Flutter, and then you have your curve. And then something awesome about Flutter, it just works. I went outside of the dimensions. So I did a minus and a +1, more than 1. And that's actually the effect you see where it bounces. So that's how you get a nice bounce, and that just worked out of the box. So now I pull back, I do it fast, 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 and then you'll see slow, 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 slow. And then right before it stops, it bounces back. And that's very similar to how it is in real life. It never just stops, it always bounces, and then, oh, will it do it, will it do? No. So I wanted to recreate that feeling, and it did work out pretty well. So now we've got something that works, that looks good. So how can we make it even better? And that's obviously by adding shaders. So this is a shader where I just have 8 rows, and then I go around it. And this is a shader I've shown before. It's my disappearing shader. I just stopped moving the wheel and then made it do random stuff. And then it shows the winner. That was my lightning talk.
Okay. Hi everyone. So I'm having a non-typical topic for a Flutter thing, I think. So I'm going to talk a bit about hosting. It's a bit of a prequel talk to the talk of Brent that's coming a bit later. We had to host a backend on the cloud, and then typically want to show you things you should think about when you want to host a backend for an enterprise company inside the cloud. So a bit about me. I've experienced designing cloud architectures for both really small companies, but also large companies. I have experience in both software and architecture, in infrastructure, sorry. So I started actually a while ago as both a backend developer and also doing infrastructure. After a while, I decided to focus primarily on infrastructure, but I use a lot of things I learned in the past in translating that to development teams. So what I also do is support my clients and dev teams in adopting the cloud, explaining the principles of how it works, how it's different from, for example, hosting your own server. And my specialization is in Microsoft Azure. So what makes your cloud hosting enterprise ready? I have some recommendations. So first of all, containerization is a really interesting one. So it's with ServerPod, for example, it comes out of the box. But what's important is that your container is immutable. This means that you don't save the state inside the container itself. So for example, if you have environment variables, they shouldn't be inside of your image. But as well, if you stop your image, delete it, and run it again, there shouldn't be a state kept inside the image that needs to be separate. So you have to think about where you store files, so you don't store it in a container, you store it somewhere different. Keep the base image as light as possible. So you always see at the top, it's using Dart 3.5.2, for example. It's important that the base image that you use, that this is as small as possible, because if it's very large, it can contain more possibilities for security vulnerabilities, because it usually contains a kernel of that needed to run Dart, for example. But you can also, you could say, I'm not using Dart, but I'm using full Ubuntu, for example, as my base image, and you install Dart on that, for example. But then you can have, if there's a vulnerability in Ubuntu, your container is also impacted. So you always want to keep that as small as possible. Multi-stage builds, that's what you also see here. So you see it starts from Dart, but then it goes to an Alpine. So it separates the compile and the actual rendering of the application into two separate pieces. This keeps your image much smaller. Otherwise, it needs to keep the full compilation. Also use versions. Always easy to revert back to a specific version. And think about containers in layers. So each time you add a line, you add a layer. So if you have multiple images, it's always interesting that you can reuse different layers to take down the build time. Then the next one, infrastructure as code. So everything you create in the cloud, also write it in code. Why should you do this? I know. What's important when writing infrastructure as code is to use modules. This allows you to quickly add or remove environments and also add abstractions. So there is a lot of resources that created behind the hood, but for an end user, creating this is much more lightweight. Also, you can do code reviews. We use Terraform, for example. We use it because it's a language that is used for multiple cloud providers, but also other solutions, like, for example, you can have for example, Dynamics, Microsoft Fabric. So these are typically not really cloud providers, but you can also use this language to program. Then a gateway and a WAF. So you put this in front of your application. Why? You want to limit the incoming points where a person could enter your application or your database, for example. You want to limit the attack surface, like they call it. You want to have a certain entry. You also, what's a good advantage of using a WAF is you can limit traffic from certain countries. For example, if you have an application that's specifically for the government in Belgium, you maybe only want it to be available in Belgium, and you don't want it to be available in other countries. You also get reporting on possible threats that are happening against your environment. Also, if there's an attack happening, you can block them on the firewall level, which prevents if a person attacks directly, let's say your application, you can't block them directly, so what could cause your application to crash, and if there is limitations to the application, that could cause corruption, for example, in the database. So you want to prevent that at front. Also, using a gateway, it provides that you can replace the backend that's running behind it. You can also do complex routing capabilities and also limit the cost during attacks. That's maybe the most important one. If you, for example, use a function that says like every execution it costs 0.1 cent. If a bot is attacking it, that price can go really high. So if you have a WAF blocking, for example, a bot, you can prevent like a crazy spike in consumption which could cause a very high cost. Then logging and metrics, of course. So now for the full stack, the server pod story, we used server pod insights, but we're looking in the future to change this. Why? Typically, we want to trigger alerts on specific metrics and logs and dispatch this to the correct team. You want alerting to be proactive and sent to your developers, and not when somebody says there is a problem, then you start looking at the logs, but then that the alerting already knows that there's stuff going wrong. Also that you can scale based on metrics, so depending if you have an application where the load is very high in the morning, you can scale the application up, and if it's nobody's using it at night, you can scale it all the way down. An interesting technology at Rise at logging, I want to go into depth, is OpenTelemetry, but this provides that you can have different kind of input data sources to collect your logs and metrics, and you can also push them out to different kind of platforms, which is interesting if you have a lot of different clients that have different types of logging platforms. The logging inside your application will remain the same, but you can provide a solution to the end customer that you can just plug in and don't have to write logging in 10 different ways. So it's much easier. Sampling and data retention. So this is how long do you keep your logs, and what's the log level, for example. If you start collecting debug logs and keeping those, that can become very costly. So you want to set a certain rate of how long data should be kept and what data should be kept. And then, of course, some clients require auditing for GDPR reasons. So then it's also important that you keep that data somewhere safe. Secret management, or maybe go quickly over this one. So it's important to have no secrets inside your CI/CD or inside your repos, but it's best to keep them inside a vault. In Azure, for example, we use an Azure Key Vault. Benefits are that you can replace a secret. I rotate them. So what I mean with this is, if, for example, a certain certificate is expiring, you can already add a new version inside the solution, and it will automatically replace them. So it will prevent any downtime. So you can easily replace a secret or certificate even before the previous one is expiring. And also you can limit who can access it. So for example, it will, for the server pod, we have certain secrets that only the application can access and nothing else. So, and then FinOps, so hosting on the cloud, it's important that you know certain principles, otherwise your cloud expense can be very high. One of them is reservation, so reserving your compute saves you a lot of money. Also, scale towards usage. Like if you know there's nothing running at night, scale it down. If you know you have high peaks in the morning, scale it up. But don't reserve the compute for the whole time if you're only using it 1 hour a day for a very high peak. Put a budget, so before you start your project, calculate how much it would cost. Put that configured inside your cloud environment so you know if you're going over budget, and also alerting. So once you go over budget, you know that there's a cost impact. So analyze the resources. Now let's visualize that in a diagram. I won't go too long in the diagram because probably Brent will explain as well. But this is, for example, the solution we did for ServerPod. So we had both ServerPod as a backend running and also Flutter web as a static web app. So this is, for example, how we would implement this for a client. So we put everything inside a private network, and we're only exposing the application itself using the web application firewall. And then, for example, we are also pushing our code to Bitrise, which also does our mobile builds, but also does the build for our backend, and as well as the Flutter web app. And for the API, it's pushing the container. For the static web app, it's pushing it directly. If you have any questions about it, then you can always ask me. So thanks for listening. And then if you have any questions about cloud hosting, you can always contact me on LinkedIn, but you can also find more information about us at A.C.A group.be/cloud. So yeah. Thank you.
the sound fine? Oh, wait. Sorry. Oops. Oh my God. Oh, now it works. Nice. Now I need my mouse to be out of the screen. Okay, all right. All right, welcome everyone. I hope the pizza isn't working too much on your stomach and everybody is still awake. So welcome to A.C.A as well. It's nice to see so many people joining us in our Antwerp office. I'm glad that this is the second time that we can organize this. Last time was in our Hasselt office. So as A.C.A we have three major offices, one satellite office. The major offices are in Hasselt, Antwerp and Ghent, with Hasselt being our main office. And then we have a satellite office in Leuven. We are with over 280 team members and have 30 plus years of experience. Now, I want to do this very small, but I wanted to share with you what we all do, because some of you might have questions. A.C.A, I do not know them that well. What do they do? So we do actually quite a lot. So first of all, we have a unit that focuses on Atlassian. We have a unit that focuses on custom software development. This is mostly backend, also some frontend. We have an innovation and usability team. They also do like user research and focus on AI and other things. We have a portal and websites team. They mostly use tools like Data CMS to create CMS for customers. We have our cloud team, which Johan, where are you? There. Is a part of, and you heard him like 10 minutes ago. Then we have our mobile apps team. That's where I work at Flutter. And we also do React Native. We also had a React Native meetup a month ago, which was also very fun to have here in our Antwerp office. And then last but not least, we have our data team, which focuses on the data. So that's all I was going to say about our company. And now let's have my talk about full stack Dart. And the question we are really going to pose is it just a possibility or is it the way to go? So we will tackle this by multiple steps. This is me, by the way. I'm a mobile developer here. I've been crafting mobile solutions since 2018. I actually have a lot of experience in Xamarin.NET MAUI stack, but yeah, as you all know, it's not doing that well. So now I'm Flutter focused. Okay, that's about me. Now, the first question we are going to pose is, what do we actually see as full stack Dart, as before we are going to introduce which components we will use? And actually, the question is, what do we see as full stack? So, first of all, this is an official definition that I found that maybe not from a so official website. But full stack development encompasses the complete process of application software development, including both the front and backend development. Basically, when we talk about full stack, we can actually see it in multiple ways with Flutter. You can look at it being the way you have a mobile application and you create the backend yourself, then you're doing full stack. You can do Flutter Web with the backend, which is full stack as well. Or how we do it at A.C.A for some projects is we call it full stack plus. We are doing both mobile, both web and backend development with Dart. So let's talk about the full stack components and which technologies we will use for that. Spoiler alert, you probably already know that we are going to use serverpod because Johan said it multiple times, but I didn't think that through when I was making these slides. So first of all, let's talk about Flutter Web. What is Flutter Web for the people that do not know it yet? You can basically run your Flutter app on the web in the same fashion as you know it, just your normal application. It's almost by changing nothing runs in the web. There are some caveats, I will talk about them later. Basically it uses CanvasKit or HTML renderer or Squasm to draw everything on the web in a bit in the same fashion than you have Impeller on mobile. We can reuse both the logic and the UI for our mobile application, which allows us to do very cool things and create user experiences that are completely uniform to each other, both in a website and on a mobile. So Flutter Web, what are its caveats?
you almost have no SAO. Actually, today I saw Eric Seidel talk about this on Twitter, that he might be looking into this. So who knows? Next year I can say we have SAO. It has some slow load times. It loads up almost like the whole application up in front. You can defer some parts of it, and we're actually today we're investigating on how to increase the loading speed of our application. So this might be a cool lightning talk if we figure it out, or someone else has figured it out. Some other caveat: not all Flutter libraries support Flutter Web. You can look it up later on. I will talk about it as well on pub.dev. You see it whether the package you want to use supports Flutter Web. But there is another thing. It's called Jasper. I think Koen posted about it. I do not have any experience with it, but I thought it was cool to put it out. So basically what it does is you create native DOM elements. So you will actually have a div and an h1 using also Flutter in like an HTML way. I don't have experience with it, but it should decrease your loading times. And you would have the possibility to use SAO and also have server-side rendering. But the downside is you lose like the possibility to just run your mobile app on the web because you need to rewrite some of the components. Would be cool if someone has experience with that, maybe Koen for a talk, or someone else out here in for the future. Now let's talk about the backend. So I brought to you 3 solutions. You already know we're going to use Serverpod. So I don't have experience with Shelf, but it's a very light web server middleware. It's great for custom setups because it does not have that many default components, which Serverpod has. So if you want to do your own thing and really build out like a bit your own framework, how you want to work with it, Shelf might be your go-to. I think it's really battle tested as well. Pub.dev runs on it, and it is published by the Dart team, meaning you can count for its quality and problem maintenance as well. Then another notable mention is Dart Frog. It's actually, I'm not too sure anymore, but I think it's a wraparound Shelf. It's very well documented. It's developed and maintained by very good ventures. They are like very known and already always out there on every conference. You see them quite a lot. Don't have experience with it, but it's a bit the same. It's very lightweight, it's very customizable, so if that's your cup of tea, go for it. Now, we use Serverpod. I have a bit more context about it because I know more about it. Basically, it's a Dart native backend. It has its focus on Flutter integration. What it basically does is I will go into technical detail later on in my talk, but it generates us the client. While for the other tools, it wouldn't be that different to creating your backend, say, with Express.js or with Java, because the other layers that you will already have, you will have to rewrite them as well in your mobile or web application. While doing it with Serverpod, all that logic is generated. It uses remote procedure calls. It's also an opinionated framework. Now, what does opinionated means? It's basically that almost all of the choices about which tools you are going to use, they're already made for you. It doesn't mean you need to use them, but they're there. So for instance, it comes with a built-in ORM system with migration support, which is really nice. It comes with almost out-of-the-box authentication support. It has already a structured organization. You can customize it, but that's what it comes with. And we're really a fan of that because we are not backend developers by nature. So I think it's good for us that it's already thought about it by someone else who has that experience, and we can just use it and leverage it to create good solutions without investing that much time to it. It also has a built-in monitor, which Johan talked about it, but use it with caution because there are some things you miss if you have a good production setup with your hosting. It also has a mini variant. Basically, one of the downsides about Serverpod is that it requires a Postgres SQL database, and that is expensive. But sometimes you do not actually need the database because you are a real backend for front-end which a real backend for front end would it be? It would be that you only act like a server in the middle, and you just redirect calls to different other third-party APIs. And for that, you have the mini variant. You can also switch between them, so it's very fine if you start with mini and just later on you have an extra feature and you know, I need a database. You can upgrade. So that would not be an issue. There are also a lot more things. I'm not going into deep into everything. Might be for the future. Now, why do we actually use Serverpod? So the reason why we use it is because it allows us to go lean and mean. Because everything is already thought out. We can quickly bootstrap a backend, but we are not limited by the framework in terms of scalability. We are not the experts in backend development, said it before. So I think it's good that things are laid out. And it's a growing company with a lot of drive to create the next backend tool. If you see them online or at FlutterCon, they give a lot of talks, and they are actually now, I think last year they were with 3 people or 4, and now they're with 8 or something. So they're growing. And also it's very well documented. And they have a good AI bot, by the way, which is trained on their GitHub repo and also their documentation, which you can use to ask some questions. Now, this is our vision on Dart full stack. So we have an Android, iOS, and web app, which runs on Flutter. Then we have Serverpod, which acts as our backend, which is hosted on Azure. And with Serverpod, you can communicate to an authentication component and other third-party APIs. Now the second important question is, when do you go full stack? Is it always? Is it never? We start by deciding that during the discovery phase with the customer. So what you will most likely do is look into what does the customer need. You also analyze technical requirements, because some customers, they have the wish that all the backends are written in Java. So in that case, you cannot do that. So you need to look to a different solution. And you also need to decide on which components are relevant. If you're thinking about making a portal that nobody will use because everyone will have the app installed via an MDM, don't make it. So, of course, depending on the needs of the customer and the users of your project. There are also some other things to look into when deciding that. It's not only like, we need a portal, okay, let's build it with Flutter Web. It's not always the case. There's like the question, do we need SAO? We have made a Flutter application for mobile apps. It's called Emovlan, about emo properties. It's a bit hard to move that to Flutter Web because you do not have anything with SAO, and you want to have SAO because otherwise when everybody searches on Google, nobody finds anything, so you cannot do it there. Also the need for any web-specific tools. Maybe the customer also has an existing component that they want to use. That's also a very good question. And also how much of the app is shared, because the major strength of using Flutter Web is that you can share all of the things between your mobile application and your Flutter Web. So those are mainly the things to think about. Mainly it comes to following type of projects: dashboards, management systems, portals, internal tooling. Those are mainly the type of projects you can see working with Flutter Web. I'm not saying that the others aren't possible, but mostly these will be the types. When to use Serverpod? Also the questions here, how complex is my backend? The main reason why I say that is because, I said it before as well, we're not backend developers. And sometimes there's a need for a whole complex backend with maybe complex architectures like CQRS or a service bus. And I'm not saying you cannot do them with Serverpod, but it doesn't also mean that it's a good idea to do it. Because there are people who are a lot more experienced than, I can speak for myself, but maybe not for you, that have more experience with those architectures, with other technologies. And maybe then it's a good point to say, maybe creating the backend as a full stack Dart isn't the way to go forward. And unfortunately, we as a A.C.A, we have also a team that has that experience with backends. So in that case, we combine the project and we create a mobile app and they can create the backend. But those are important things to think about. As well, can we start with Serverpod Mini? It might be a bit easier on your hosting, so it's a good thing to think about. And yeah, last but not least, know the capabilities of your team. It's very important to know. In practice, we mostly tend to go with Serverpod when we have a BFF+. Now, what is BFF+? It doesn't necessarily mean, like what I said earlier, only calls that redirect to a different service, but you can also store a bit of data, like some user configuration, the user management. We often have like a user management system that we create with Serverpod. Then we use that to communicate to other third-party services, and there's like a few extra features which we need to have in our own database. That is mostly the idea to think about when to go with Serverpod or not. Because yeah, you know, projects can grow, and if you already start with it very technically, very complex, then maybe Serverpod is not the best way to go, but that's just opinion. It might be a bit the same that I'm saying all over again, but basically it comes down to this. Having a tool that can do the things you want does not necessarily mean you should use it. I think that's a very important thing to go by. Basically, you can also use an Excel sheet as a database, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. And these tools are very powerful. Serverpod is very powerful. You can quickly create a backend. It's so easy, it's so good documented, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be critical about what you're actually doing, because you're still probably delivering a project to an enterprise customer. And it's the same thing with the hosting that Johan earlier explained. You can easily move your Serverpod or your Flutter web page, move it on Firebase. It's fine, it will run. But at some point, you will need extra things, and those are the things that you need to be careful for. So keep that in mind, I would say. Now let's get a bit more technical. Now that we have cleared out when and what we see as full stack, so how do we actually do it? Flutter web is actually pretty easy, and in order to set it up, you can actually just create Flutter, use the Flutter create command. Automatically it creates a web component, or you can add it behind the platform's options. To add it later on, you can just run flutter create dot platforms web, and then you will add the web component later on. It's as easy as it gets, actually. Now, for the architecture part, we actually do not change anything that much in our app architecture. However, we do focus on dynamic size changes. Mostly we use media query.sizeOf, but you also sometimes use a layout builder. It depends on whether you want the whole width of your view or the whole width of your page. We use it to decide on breakpoints, and we also find out that if you do that right, you also get tablet support almost for free. So that's very important to go by. We also need to ensure package compatibility, what I talked about earlier. You can see on pub.dev which platforms the packages support, so keep it in mind that not everything supports web. Most of them do, but some of them don't. So, and also, we don't do it, but definitely look into Vosselen. We have required dependencies. We are depending on get, so we're blocked. But if you don't use get, look into Vosselen, because it should increase the performance of your Flutter web, which I really want, but I can't have right now. Okay, CI/CD. So earlier, as shown by Johan, we use Bitrise, not since long ago, but right now we do, and I'm fairly happy with it. Now, how do we actually build our website and push it to Azure? It's fairly easy. So run flutter build web in release mode. Then these scripts, yeah, these are the CLI toolings that you need to install on Bitrise. The static web CLI tool is actually an NPM package. So then you log in the Azure command line tool, and then you run SWA deploy, you pass your app name, the environment, Very nice to know if you would ever use Azure. But you have environment production, but if you run environment, I'm not sure what the other word actually is, but if you don't add it, then it's like a preview. So that you can actually use on your pull request builds to actually have a site you can serve to, which might be nice to investigate. But this is our almost whole our pipeline. There are some extra things we do, but are irrelevant to this, but it's as easy as it gets. Now, what is our experience with Flutter Web? Design is important because the focus that we have is to have a uniform customer journey, which means that most of the time we will use the same components on Flutter Web than we use on Flutter Mobile. But it also means they need to be designed very well, because on mobile you have different events. You have like a swipe, but on the web you do not do swipes normally. So it's very important for your designer to focus on that and tell them like, hey, we need good components that we can reuse and are both suitable for web and for mobile. It's easy to get going if the requirements are clear. Sometimes conditional imports are necessary, which you can actually easily do. Is when you have a library that is not supported by Flutter Web. You can just do a conditional import and let it import about some other package that has the same interface. Hot restart is slow. You don't have hot reload, which is cumbersome. Also an open issue for like 5 years or something. General performance is bearable, I would say. Other people of the team, they find it very nice. I'm maybe a bit more critical, so others might find it very well, but I think I can see it that it's not that smooth, but can't speak for Wasm, so very looking forward to it. And the slow load times issue. There are some other things, don't forget it. Don't forget about mobile and web. It took a while before we actually were like, oh, yeah. You also have mobile and web, because when I pick my phone up, I can still search to that site. Also, don't forget to increase the version of your application, because that will do, when you increase the version, you will not always clear the cache. There are some issues with it. We're still investigating that as well, so if we ever find everything out, it will be a lightning talk. And everybody can navigate to any page at any time. Keep that in mind, because sometimes you might forget about it. Now, serverpod. I hope everything was clear about Flutter Web, but basically the general experience is like it's easy to apply it to your already existing project. There are some small things here and there, but nothing that major. So, setting up serverpod, also not that hard. Dart pub global activate serverpod CLI, which is the CLI tool of serverpod. You can create a serverpod project with serverpod create with a name, my backend for frontend. -- mini ensures you have the mini variant, and to upgrade from the mini variant, you can just run serverpod create dot. Now, a big slide. This is the overall architecture that we are using inside our applications before and with serverpod. I will try to explain it on why it's so massive. But basically, before we use serverpod, we have a Flutter application that mostly has a layered architecture. It's for a reason that we do this. We have created it based on past experiences and is focused on a bit larger projects where you can really have the scalability and where you can also easily switch between different backends if you would need so in the future, that you don't need to rewrite your whole application. So you have the domain layer, an API repository layer, an application layer, and a presentation layer. We use MVVM, so hence the presentation layer contains all that. Right now, when we have serverpod, what we can basically do is we can pick the logic that is inside this API layer and the application layer, and we can just move it over to our serverpod. Now, why don't we just remove these? Exactly for the thing that I explained earlier. Right now we will use serverpod, but it doesn't mean that in the future we will use something else. That's the reason why we still have our own domain models and our own API layer, which is of course completely slimmed down because all the actual code is generated by Serverpod. And that's how we can still, with such a heavy architecture, don't spend a lot more time on having a backend for frontend with Serverpod because of all that code generation. And that's also the following slide, code generation with Mason. It helps us quite a lot. Basically, for the people that do not know what Mason is, it's a template generator which helps Steam generate files quickly and consistently by pre-gen and post-gen hooks, which basically allows you to run any bus script you want in Dart, and Mustache templates. And we use it for quite a lot of things. We use it for creation of our projects. Actually, the whole outline of our application with all the different layers is completely generated by Mason. It also allows us, instead of a normal scaffold, have us to be very updated with the very latest version of Flutter, because all the pub-get and all the Flutter create commands are run with the pre-gen and the post-gen hooks. We also use it to apply in our own architecture. For instance, we have a Mason brick that when you run serverpod create, afterwards we run that brick, and then our whole architecture is put in place and we can just start developing. Also for new views, new models, because we have a lot of reusability, we have a lot of models that are there in our domain. We also have a DTO, but it's always almost the same, but that's merely by accident, because in the future it might not be. So that's why we also have a brick for that, so that we just, with running that brick, saying, hey, these properties, we want them, it just generates us all the code and puts it in the right place. And it also helps us to reuse the same folders within our layered architecture, so everything is clearly laid out. Also large components like authentication within our serverpod, we have a brick for that, so we just have to run it, and like 90% of our whole authentication setup is done. Serverpod, ORM, it has a custom ORM system, which is really nice. An ORM system basically is in place to go from your object in Dart to a relational model which is in your database. It uses native Dart types and null safety. This is an example of it. Basically, you say what the class is. If you will use it in the database, you need to add the table. Later on, we will also use these generators to generate our DTOs between our serverpod and our mobile or web application, but without the table. And then you put there your fields. It's very easy. It generates us the code afterwards. When you use serverpod generate, you can also create automatically the migration. So using serverpod create migration, serverpod will automatically create a migration file. You can, of course, adjust it later on. Say, for instance, something went wrong, but most of the time, if you don't do anything that crazy, it just creates an auto migration, and you can start up the application doing -- apply migrations, and then the migrations are applied automatically. This is an example of the code, how you can then later on query your database, put objects in it, and so on and so on. So everything is actually very clean. It's all type safe and stuff. It's all generated by serverpod generate. Now, an endpoint of serverpod. You can create separate endpoints with multiple RPC calls. That's what serverpod uses. You need to return a primitive data type, a void or a serializable object. In order to create that serializable object, we go back to this, leave out the table. This is a serializable object when you run serverpod generate. We put them in different folders, so it's clear which ones are our DTOs and which ones are the ones that we use in our database. And again, you run serverpod generate to create your whole client as well. Who would have guessed it? Here's an example endpoint. We also have the automatic require login support. So when you use serverpod authentication, you can easily say, hey, this endpoint needs to be authenticated and this one does not. This is an example. of an endpoint is just a method, and you return the DTO, and run serverpod generate, and this is what you can do at the client side. You need to create the client in your constructor. I didn't put it there, not that difficult. Then you just do client.versions, because it's on the versions endpoint, and you can just call the method, and it's completely type safe. CI/CD as well here with serverpod. It's a bit different. We using containerization, as explained by Johan. I'm also looking into doing containerization with our Flutter Web, but right now we do not do that yet. But in the future, that might be a good way to go forward. Basically, run Docker build, add some tags, and push it to your repository. Here at A.C.A, we have our custom repository. I will not explain it further. It's a Harbor repository. I'm looking to Jan. Okay, yes, correct. But basically, it doesn't matter what you actually use. The only downside, sorry, Johan, is that Azure does not automatically pick up our new containers. So we set the image names to our configuration of both the insights and the normal app service container that we have on our hosting, and we restart these web apps using the Azure command line tool. Now, a thing that I want to go a bit more in depth in, Johan started the conversation, is about secret management. It's a very important one, because right now your container will be online, and by default, serverpod has these passwords.yaml files, and also I think they're called like production.yaml, staging.yaml, and some other ones. And you would normally put your secrets in there, but that means that they are in Git, and they are inside your container. Even when you move them to CI/CD, they're still in your container. So that's why we inject them at runtime in the container using Azure Key Vault and as an environment variable. Here below you can see environment variables in the Azure platform. You can just put an environment variable there, and you can link it to the Key Vault. In order to use them, you can use platform.environment with your key in your backend, and then you have your key, and it's injected when you do Docker run in Azure. And that way, you can use secrets the right way. Secrets are not stored in a container anymore. The other thing is you need to reuse the containers throughout the different environments, because normally you would set your environment variables when you do Docker build, but you will not do Docker build anymore now because you do it at the Docker run. So you need to have the same container and move it to all the different environments. So what we most likely do right now is we have it in a repository, it has a certain tag, and when we bump it to staging or production, we just link it to the correct tag, and then it gets deployed. You can change the secret and simply restart the container. Johan explained, say for instance, hey, a third-party API has a new API key because the other one was invalid. You do not need to do that much. Just change the secret, restart the container, everything is fine. Another thing to do is to not use the passwords .yaml and production.yaml. I already said don't use it, but it doesn't mean automatically that you can inject everything. So you need to look up which key. This was totally not explained very clear. I'm sorry. Basically, for every thing inside these files, there is a certain key. And if you set the value to that key, then it will use that value that you set to it as the value instead of the passwords.yaml file. I hope that was a bit more clear. Now, our experience with serverpod, it's very easy to start with limited knowledge of backends. It's also very stable. It has a very good performance right now. The default insight solution is also pretty awesome. We still have to decide for it long term. I think it's better to move to a different solution, but especially for testing and staging environments, it's really awesome how clear you can actually see everything from a session ID is linked to all the errors that you get, to your database queries, and so on and so on. And we also like the flexibility to go from the mini to the full version. The only major downside I see is that you have a Postgres login by default. But it comes with a lot of good stuff. The ORM is very well. It has nice support for the other things. We have also added a few things, or changed a bit a few things to how we work with Serverpod. We created some seeders to seed our database that are run every time the server is set up, and it will check, has the seed already run? If not, then you run it. Basically, the reason why we would do something like that is we have a lot of data in our database. For instance, when you have a platform where you can have a subscription, you put all the subscriptions in our database, but if you put them in your testing database, they do not automatically come in your staging and production database. But when you put it in a seeder, and it runs every time it startups, when you then up your server to a different environment, then it gets run anyways. The default authentication component, which we have made, powered by Mason, is a really nice one. We can set up authentication linked to Firebase very quickly. The dynamic creation of the environment files, and we can transfer our architecture over to create a sustainable backend. It's something that we really liked in the process, because right now you do not need to think different when you work on the backend versus having a project where there is no backend. Now, the major question: should you go full stack? And the answer is, it depends. It really depends. I tried to explain a lot of different things, a lot of different opinions on how we decide when to use full stack, but the same might not apply to you. So I would say, think critically about everything, and I'm sure you will find the right solution for your problem. I want to thank you for your attention. I want to say a small thing. So I went pretty high level. I didn't go into deep, but I hope it was interesting anyway. But the main idea is that this is more of a conversation starter to have more follow-up talks, because Dart full stack is so broad and there are so many things to talk about. You cannot have everything covered from Serverpod in one talk. But I think it might be interesting if some people have experience in several specific parts, that they give a lightning talk about it. Like, for instance, this week we were doing on Flutter Web universal linking. How to set up universal linking might be a good lightning talk. We might give it next time, but that's the main idea, and I think it's really nice to have Dart with its full stack capabilities. And if there are any questions, you can post them to me now or later. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for the awesome talk. I was curious if you played around with the method streaming in
No.
Serverpod?
Not yet. We currently, for the projects that we are doing, we do not have the need to it, but it looks very promising. I went to a talk about it, I think, in the FlutterCon. I think Victor gave a talk about it. Looks very promising. Do not have any experience with it.
Yeah, it looks very good. It just
Yeah.
allows you not to deal with anything about
No.
network streaming that much, and just allows you to stream
No.
Dart.
That's something that I really feel about how Serverpod is moving forward. They are trying to focus on problems people have, like that meta streaming, and they really try to do it well, and not just simply like, hey, we have support for this, but to really go the next level, that the support is also easy to use for the end users, and as I said, to allow us as a mobile developer to create good backends, because it's not that easy, I think, to just switch over from front end to back end with limited knowledge, and I think they do that very well.
Maybe on a little side note, I don't think they're gonna stay with Postgres only. I
Yeah. Okay.
remember talking with Victor last summer, and they were looking into having multiple options
Okay.
available.
That would be very nice.
I'm not sure how their
No.
roadmap is, of course, but
Okay, yeah, that's nice to know. I didn't know that. Okay, that would definitely make hosting cheaper.
The mic is still for just go ahead.
Okay.
Just shout.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I think it was a really nice presentation, and me personally, I learned a lot of things I didn't know, so I was really impressed by your talk. I have two questions. So my first one is, you mentioned the two Menson, right?
Mm-hmm.
That generates, if I understood correctly, it generates when you start a new project, it gives you like the base architecture.
Yeah.
So it's a huge head start, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you experiment by bringing this to a next step, or I would imagine that you combine this with the LLM prompt, and then you get the head start of the architecture, additional code logic, and now going further, throw screenshots, and it will build some widgets plus navigation. And then you already have, I would say, above 60%. So I was wondering if you play with something like that you go even further in this automation.
I think it's very, very technically possible. We are actively trying to extend the way how we use Mason. I think also the talk that comes next by Romain will interest you. But Mason works for us because we have custom control of it, and we can create everything within our architecture. And that's the power of Mason that we very much like. We haven't looked into bringing AI to that, but maybe Stan did, but I didn't. But it's very much possible. We are actively looking to also lay out smaller components that we use in all the projects. But it's a bit, yeah, you need to decide whether it's a better fit to have it in a package or generate it through Mason. And that's, yeah, but that's, yeah, everybody's opinion, of course, but Mason is a very nice tool, so if you aren't using it already, it's a nice thing to look into.
And my second question is that I could see that your team is really knowledgeable. Are you guys having some open source things, like say base projects and tools that you can look into and
Not yet. It's nice that you asked this question because we are actively looking into how we can contribute open source. But we are doing it. We are now investigating how we are going to do it, and it's morely business talk than technical talk. But the idea is there that we go a bit more open source in the near future.
all right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks indeed for your talk. I've been using ServerPod for 4 or 5 months, I think now, and I see that the state of ServerPod currently is around the same stage as Flutter was in 2021, I think. Are you also opening tickets on GitHub, for example?
Not yet. Not yet. No, it's definitely something we haven't been using ServerPod for that long as well. I think we started somewhere this year investigating and developing with it. But indeed, that would be a better approach. But we also don't have that much issues with ServerPod yet. Because the setup that we're currently using, or at least what features that we use from ServerPod, they are not that complex. The complexity is somewhere else. But that means that, yeah, we haven't ran into that much obstacles with ServerPod, but definitely when we see something.
I think an important one is the one related to seeding.
Yeah.
They're currently also looking at how should they implement it. They have, I think, 4 or 5 active discussions on
I didn't know that.
rewriting cloud uploads, authentication, rewrite of authentication, and adding hooks and seeding, for example.
Okay.
So I think if you're currently using ServerPod, and it's to everyone, if you are currently
Okay.
working with it, really create your tickets on GitHub. If you have issues, they are really active on answering it, helping you out with what is going wrong, if they are currently working on a solution or if they have something else. And I also think another tip is using the Yeah, they have in their documentation, they have a chatbot that
Yeah.
is linked to their documentation,
Yeah.
which is really good. So if you have a question on how
Yeah.
to structure some data or use something,
It's really nice, the documentation. And I had to come back indeed. I didn't know that they were actively looking into the whole seeding thing, so we'll definitely check that out tomorrow maybe. But all right.
Post your solution as well.
Yeah, well, it might be nice to share with them. Maybe they pick ours above theirs, but I doubt it. But we'll see. Thanks. Good. All right. Thanks again.
Let's have a 10-15 minute break and then it's a talk from Romain. Thanks, Brent. time by Romain. And indeed, the question was already asked, isn't it possible to integrate AI into Mason? But Romain did something different, something custom, and he will talk about it more. So take the stage.
Yes, I just need to log into an account. Oops. All right. Oops, oops, oops. All right. So hi everyone, my name is Romain. I've been involved with Flutter for 4 years now, and I'm the founder of Codika. And today I'm going to make a live demo of our tool, which is composed of 3 different things, and you discover tonight what that is. So, what is Codika? At the base of Codika is a Dart CLI, so a command line interface written in Dart that simplifies professional mobile app development. We handle all the configuration and the distribution process automatically with the Dart CLI. Initially, the project started as Mason bricks, and this replies to your question about can we create a system that's bigger than just Mason bricks. We encapsulated core components of mobile apps into their own and independent Mason bricks. We have like a main starter project to which those bricks are connected. And everything is handled by our CLI to glue everything together. Recently, we've added a new functionality which enables anyone to create their own toolkits. So we facilitate the creation of custom starters and custom components, and this will be one of the demonstrations I will make today. So, the talk was, I will deploy a production-ready application in under 20 minutes on test flights. But what is a production-ready app? In this context, we are going to consider it's an app that has a clean environment, so different flavors for different environments. Environment-dependent backend, so if we use, for example, Firebase, we want 2 different Firebase projects set up for each environment. Flutter version manager, of course. A clean CI/CD pipeline, so we want an entire pipeline that makes it easy for us to deploy a new app to the stores. And code push, it's nice to have. Is anyone familiar with Shorebird here? Just raise the hand. Okay. So for the other ones, I'm going to explain what it is. For this demonstration, we are going to use Flavorizer for creating the environments, Firebase as backend, FVM, CodeMagic. Is anyone not familiar with CodeMagic? Please raise the hand. Okay, that's a good point. Okay, CodeMagic basically is a CI/CD tool that makes it easy to create create mobile apps and send it to the stores. And Shorebird, so it's code push. It's made by Felix Angloff and Eric Seidel, one of the founders of Flutter, and it enables to update mobile apps without going through the stores. I'll explain later how it works. This is the structure of the talk. The first live demo is going to be, we are going to use the Codika CLI to create an app and send it to the stores. The second demo will be about showcasing, so just one point about the first demo. We are going to push the initial Flutter app, so the counter app, to the stores. And in the second live demo, I'm going to show all the Codika components and some features that we have, especially with environment variables. And in the third demo, I talked about it, we are going to generalize a starter project and a component that we will be able to use inside the CLI directly. After that, we are going to talk about the benefits of Codika, and then what's the vision and what's the mission of Codika, actually. Let's get started. So we are going to do a lot. It's going to be really dense, so maybe during this demo I'm not going to explain everything, but since the app has to be built for like 10 minutes, I will come back to some explanation once it's being built. So we are going to create the Flutter counter, as I said. We are going to set up CodeMagic. create the App Store Connect page of the app, deploy the app using Shorebird, and deploy a patch version to the app. And all that in under 5 minutes. So that's the promise. Everything can go can go bad. I hope it's not, but yeah, let's do it. I'm going to sit because it's easier. All right, that comes later. So as I said, the Codika CLI is a CLI that just runs in your terminal. And here are some of the commands that we have currently in production. And the one we are interested in is the create command. So let's start. Codika create. The Codika create command will ask us for some information about the app. Here we are going to say it's Belgium Meetup. Okay. Codika. Oops. We are going to set up Git, and it asks us for a Git URL. So I'm going to create a new one. Oops. Create. All right. Now the CLI asks us which environments we want. We are going to take development and production for this one. And as I said, we are going to use the Flutter starter and not the Codika one. Out of the box, it automates the change of app icons and splash screen. So we are going to take this. We are going to use Firebase, and we are going to create new projects. So the CLI has the capacity to create projects on top of connecting to existing projects. We are going to use Shorebird, and we are going to use CodeMagic. So while everything is being built, we can already go on the stores and set up some information. So we are going to create the identifiers. Oops. I do have Wi-Fi. Belgium Meetup. Continue, register. We are going to directly create a new profile for it that we will link inside CodeMagic to sign the application. Belgium Meetup, continue, and we're going to use this one. Profile, generate. We don't need to download it because CodeMagic actually has access to it, but what we can already do is register the application inside CodeMagic. You're going to grab it from GitHub, take Flutter, and here we should see Belgium Meetup Codika. Finish. We can switch to the YAML configuration. So Codika automates the creation of the workflow, so the codemagic.yaml file, based on the configuration that we have. This webhook, we can already put it inside GitHub. This is because we can automate the builds based on some push on some branches. So when we are going to push the code on the prod branch, it's going to create a new version of the app. This was, I knew this was going to happen, so everything is fine. Okay, I can wait. Let's register the webhook, and that's now done here. We can go back to the developer portal, and we are going to create, oops, I should have, oh, it's fine. We have plenty of time. Okay, we are going to register the app inside App Store Connect, as I said. Create a new app, iOS, Belgium Meetup. English, let's say. Let's take this one, Belgium Meetup. Complete, create. All right, let's go check what happened with the CLI. Here we can see, I'm quickly going to show you what it did. So it created the Firebase project, and it also initialized the Firestore databases. And it pushes some rules directly on the Firestore. I'm going to show you later what those were. We set up FVM, to 3.27.2, which is a parameter that can be changed. We set up GitHub, we set up the flavors, we created the starter project, and we automated some steps here. And this is, I'm going to explain also later what this is. Don't worry about this, it's absolutely normal. In the Google info plist, when you add authentication, as you probably know, there is a reverse client ID when you add Google authentication in Firebase, but here I didn't, so it's normally it didn't find it. All right, now it's cleaning the project, and in test flight I can already register myself as an internal tester. The goal of this demonstration is to have the app on my phone by the end of the talk. I'm going to invite myself. All right. Timing is perfect. The build has now done, and it opened directly the project in my computer. And as we can see, it did all the Firebase configuration automatically, so it downloaded all the files, and here I have a project ready to be developed. There is a central file that that acts as operator of all the different blocks that we use in Codika, which is this one. And as we can see, we have 4 components inside this one. Those components are mason bricks. But I need to speed up for the build, so I'm just going to continue here. We need some additional setup to link the project to CodeMagic, so add the CodeMagic ID here. I will go to the apps. Actually, I should open this in a new tab. Belgium Meetup. Let's get the app ID. Where is it? It's here. And I just need to add the provisioning profile inside CodeMagic now. So I can go to CodeMagic, to the teams, to my team in which I added the app. Inside code signing identities, provisioning profile, and here I will be able to see Belgium Meetup profile and give it the name that was provided in the config file. And so basically that is it. Now we can use the Codika CLI to automate the build and send the app to the stores. So this, let me just check, because I don't want it to fail. But I just need to be sure it's okay. But it should be. Otherwise it happens, okay? I can push already here the changes. Changed. Oh, there is something I need to do. Actually, I can say Codika, CodeMagic setup. What this is going to do is it's going to send the environment variables inside CodeMagic. So Brent talked about it earlier. We don't want to have environment and secret variables inside GitHub. So we need to send them to CodeMagic, and we use their API to do this. And so if now, well, you know what, I'm going to explain later, because I want the build to happen quickly. Update CodeMagic, commit, sync. All right, and now I can do Codika, build, prod, and voila. So now it's going to push the entire app inside the prod branch, and this is going to launch a build inside CodeMagic and build the mobile app. If I want to build a patch, so now we're more relaxed because the build is sent, so I can talk a bit more easily now. If I want to create a patch, I can simply say prod build patch, and it will send the patch inside CodeMagic also. I can show you here. Inside CodeMagic, we have a dedicated workflow, so it's quite a big file. But I have a prod iOS workflow, which is the one that was executed when we push on the prod branch. And I have a prod iOS patch, which is executed when we push on the prod patch. Earlier, as you saw, we chose to use the development and the production environments. If we had selected test and stag, all come with similar workflows, where we have Shorebird automatically included inside the environment. And well, we are going to make a modification. So I'm going to go to the main app. Is anyone not familiar with the cursor here, the IDE? Please raise the hand. No? Okay. So it's basically a clone of VS Code that encapsulates some AI functionalities and which lets you talk with your code base in natural language. And we are going to use it here to automate some modifications. So I'm just going to say, you know the basic Flutter app, it's a counter. I want to add a decounter button. It's just an easy modification. Please add a decount button and please make it a separate widget and have it be used by both buttons. It's smarter than us, so it should understand what I said. I'll help you create a separate counter. I'll check that it's correct though. So here it changed the classical floating button by a counter button, and the counter button should be here. Actually, I want it to be in another file. Let's ask it. Put that button in another file. Okay, when I said I included AI in the system, I'm not talking about this. It comes later, of course. It's just to make the workflow easier here. All right, accept all. I'm just going to check counter, all right. And now I'm going to push the patch directly. Let me just push here, changed UI, let's say sync. And let me build the production patch. We can normally see, if we see red, it's really bad. Okay, not yet. This is the workflow, so I can just show inside CodeMagick what happens. Those are all scripts that are automatically written for users, and it will build the app later. And normally we should have a queued, okay, here we have a queued task, which will be the creation of the patch. I think I finished for this first demo, so everything currently went well. It can still fail, but currently it went well. So what happened? A lot happened. We talked about, your question earlier was how can we have a system that makes blocks glue together? The difficult part of this is about the configuration files actually. If you want to include authentication, well, you need to add the code of the screens, but you also need to change the info plist, for example. You need to add packages, you need to add assets, you need to add a lot of things on top of the code, strictly speaking. And that's what we automate with the CLI. So we have, I can show you the code. It wasn't meant to be done, but you're technical guys, so I mean, I can have some freedom here. Inside the code, the authentication block. So those are the components. I can show you already here. Those are all the different Mason bricks that we have. And inside each Mason brick, we have a Codika folder, which automates the imports and the different steps of creating blocks. So here it adds those assets. It adds some block providers, some dependencies. Here it changes some stuff inside the info plist. By default, the Codika app handles multi-language, so we have different localization tokens for each language. We have routes, a lot of things are happening. And this is what we can see inside the execution. That's what we saw here actually. This is everything that's implemented for each block. Let me go back to my presentation. So we have the project created, we have the flavor setup, FVM setup, Firebase, the projects were created, so I didn't create them earlier. The CLI created them for us. And it downloaded the configuration files, modified the app icon and the splash screen. And on the distribution side, we created the entire app on App Store Connect, set up Shorebird, CodeMagic, and enable finally the command Codika build command. So this is what happened. We have here we use the Flutter starter. So we don't have special components here. It was just the counter app, but we have core components which can be integrated in any project. So they're really independent from any other architecture in your app. It's the splash screen, app icon, Shorebird, and CodeMagic. And this is going to make sense right now, because I want to show you how to create an app with the Codika component library. And this is how it presents. We have a Codika starter, which, just as Brent say, you have this in your company, where you have a Mason brick that initializes a project. Well, I have the same. It's a Codika starter, and it initializes a design system, design components, a routing system. It has a domain-driven design architecture, and actually there is a lot more here. And what's important, I can show you just here. So this starter also has access to all the components here, but on top of it, we provide a lot more components out of the box. And what's important, as I said, is that each block here uses the design components from the starter. So that means we have a centralized way of changing the app. And so we can quickly create really complex mobile apps, change the design, and change the screens on the fly, actually. With our CLI being able to publish the apps really fast, it means we can just streamline the app creation really easily. And we have a domain-driven design architecture, which means it's really, I mean, it doesn't mean because we could do it badly, but it's professional in the way that it's really well organized and structured inside the application. For example, one thing that was really important for us was the ability to change the backend if you wanted. Currently we have Firebase, but we have always interfaces and classes that implement them. So the idea is we don't need to change the app if you want to go to Supabase or to Serverpod or something like that. All right, so those are the Codika components. There are many more. And I want to show you one particular one, which is about branch.io. Does anyone know, or no, does anyone not know branch.io? Please raise the hand. Okay. So branch.io is basically a deep linking system. Maybe you use the one from Firebase, but it's deprecated, bad news. It's not continued anymore. It lets you share links that point to a location inside your app. And branch.io does it in a really good way, where you can have a lot of analytics behind it. But if anyone set up branch.io, it's really a nightmare. There is a lot of things that need to be automated in like the info plist inside a lot of configuration files. And we automated that with files. And since you're tech nerds, again, I can show you. Let's go to here. So this is everything we automate in the Android manifest, where we add intent filters. In the info plist, we add a lot of things. Okay, let's go. We are going to create a new project. So clear, we have the Belgium Meetup, and I'm going to show you now if you do Codika create. First I'm going to show something else, demo. We are not going to create the end of the app, so we don't care about this. If you take the Codika starter, here we can select all the different blocks that we want. We just select the ones we want, and it will add them to during the building process. The CLI is smart enough because there are some dependencies between those blocks. For example, to have authentication, you need to have user profile. Well, if you take only authentication, it's going to recognize which one needs to be added and automatically add them to your mobile app. And again, as I said, we can automate the app icons and stuff, but we're not going to finish this app. So clear. I wanted to show you the branch.io thing. Create. What's the default name? Branch.io demo. Oops. We are not going to launch this one on the stores. I just wanted to show you something. We are going to add the block later, so you see the changes. Yes, let's have this. Oh no. Let's go back. Create. Branch IO demo. I selected Firebase, but for this one we're not going to use Firebase. Oops, no, no, and no. Okay. So again here, just like before, it adds the flavors block, FVM, Git, and a lot of other stuff. Is there a question? Because we have to wait like 30 seconds. Is there a question? A lot of questions. Okay, I'll take him first because he raised it first.
How do you manage, you're using Mason, a lot of dependencies. How do you manage dependency hell? Do you have certain dependencies that have conflicts with each other?
Yes, so when we, basically in the starter project, for just the starter project, we have a pub spec init that sets the versions of your dependencies. So I can show you inside here, Codika starter. Oops, there is a pub spec init, and the content of this file is going to be copied inside the pub spec of the created project. And so with this one, you're sure that there is no error. Yes, exactly. But that means that you sometimes have to, I mean, sometimes I create a new project. I use, on this one it doesn't work, but I use the version lens. If you don't use this, you should. This here, where you can see all the new versions. And sometimes I create just a sample project where I update all the versions. I check that everything works still, and then I update the pub spec init. Yep.
Can you add a full configuration to the create command, or have it with parameters instead of interactively going through them?
Yes. Actually, so the configuration file that I showed you here, this configures literally the app. And so I have here a project. If we say Codika create -c and I say config.yaml, it will bypass all the input and just create it from scratch. Because the idea behind this, and I will come back in the mission and the vision of Codika, is to really streamline the entire process. And yes, so we had to find something like this. All right, so here we are. If you're lost sometimes when I switch screens and stuff, don't hesitate to ask me where we are, because I know it can be a bit overwhelming. But so here we are in the branch.io project that I created, and I wanted to show you how we manage environment variables. So if here I say Codika create, add block. The first thing is it's going to check the configuration and check which starter project I used. And it will only show us the different components that are linked to the starter project. It will become handy later. So I go to branch.io. Wait, okay. Branch.io, oops. All right. And by having pushed to GitHub, we can analyze all the changes that occur when we add a new block. And so it's a good way to see what actually happens. So we can see in the Android manifest file, it added a lot of lines, and those are configured with some variables here. We have the string. Those are parameters that are inside the environment, so we don't hard code them inside the configuration files. Just as in the info plist, we have, for example, the live key and the test key. Those need to be added inside the environment files, and to do so, Codika provides a command. It says Codika, I think it's set env var, where we can see the different environment variables that are configured on my computer. And so I can simply pick the branch.io scheme, let's say. I add a variable. And what it does is inside my environment files, it's going to add it automatically inside here. It's really handy because there is a direct link between this and CodeMagic. So whenever I change an environment file or a variable, we update the file in CodeMagic, so there is a sync always. And that's why here we see that it's invalid because I didn't set up CodeMagic and it just don't find the actual CodeMagic project. All right, that was it for the environment variables. Let's see what CodeMagic did. So the build is finished. It has been sent to the stores, and normally if I go back to the App Store Connect, to test flight, I know Apple requires some verification process, yes. So we should have it in like 1 or 2 minutes. So let me show you the last demo of tonight. Live demo 2 went again pretty well. I mean, did you understand something I said? Because that's like the measure. Yeah, that's how I measure if it went well actually. So, but if you understood, it's fine. Live demo 3, we are going to. Sorry?
We are inspired by the speed you are doing.
I have to, otherwise there is a lot I said it was going to be dense. So let's generalize a starter project and a component. We make it really easy, so for those who used Mason, writing Mason blocks is not difficult in itself, but it's cumbersome. There are a lot of things to do. You need to copy the files, you need to rename variables. It's really a lot of work. And we try to make this simpler. So we are going to create a starter project. And the advantage of Codika is that the starter project will still benefit of the core components that we have. So basically, you can create your own architecture and still use our CodeMagic pipeline. So there is no vendor lock, I would say, in using our architecture and our way of doing things. You can set up your own. Live demo 3, here something can go wrong, so I love this move. We are going to create a custom starter project, create a custom component, and use them locally on the computer. So I'm going to go back to the first project that we had inside Belgium Meetup. And what we are going to do is we are going to say, let's say this project where we added the decrement button, we want this to be our initial Flutter project, and we always want this decrement button. So we can use the Codika create component. Yep. And it will ask us what kind of component we want to do. So here I said we are going to do a starter project. So let's select a starter. What's the name of the organization? I will say Meetup. And the name of the component, let's say starter. Here I can directly copy files and copy path actually. So for this one, I'm going to copy the relative path of the main. But it's important to know we could actually select multiple files and copy. You know what? I'm going to show you. A relative path here, copy, and we can copy multiple file paths, and it's going to generalize all those paths and create the corresponding folders if there are subfolders, of course. But here, of course, I need to start over. Voilà, starter, meetup, starter. I'm just going to take this one. All right. So it detected that we have one file, in total one file. Do you want to proceed? We want to proceed. It will automatically create a variable for the project name. When you import some widgets from other files, you have the path, the name of your project inside the path. So if you want to reuse those inside other projects, you need to generalize the project name so that you can put it as a variable later. But in this one, it didn't detect any. I'm not going to go too deep here. We are not going to add any variable. and we are going to create the starter project. What happened? I can show you here. It created a new folder, Codika local blocks, where we have the meetup starter here that was automatically created, and it changed, it added some default variables inside here by default. Okay, I will also create another component that contains the counter button, because as you saw in the starter project, I didn't generalize the counter button. So if I use this one out of the box, it won't run because I don't have the button. So let's create a component with the button. Meetup button. Since it's not a starter project, you can link this component to an existing starter project on your local machine. And in this case, we are going to send it to Meetup. We are taking here the folder, copy relative path again. Here we took a folder, so it checked all the subfiles inside this folder and it detected one file. We are going to generalize. We don't want to add any variable. By the way, variables are really interesting when you generalize objects because you can generalize entire pipelines of object definition to object UI. So if you have a widget that shows the content of an object, then you can generalize the entire pipeline in the architecture. Okay, and so the final demo is here. I can now, I can show you here, it added the meetup button in the local blocks. Codika create, up. And here we can see now we have the option of having the meetup starter. You're going to select this one, and as we can see, we have one component that's linked to that project, which is the button. And well, again, we have all the core components that are still available to this new project. We are not going to join this. All right. Voila. And that's it. Normally, by now, I should be able to show you that it worked. Maybe for just, this is a little detail, but normally you have to say that you didn't encrypt some data. You probably know you have to go manually check this inside. Well, actually there is a way to automate this, and so you don't have to do it yourself. And this is by, I can show you because it's inside the blocks. Wait, blocks, inside the starter. And here inside the info plist, we automate this. Its app uses not exempt encryption. So if you set that to false inside your info plist, you don't have to put this manually inside App Store Connect. This is a tip from Binotto. I'm going to find his name back. I have it here actually. No, I'll give it to you later, otherwise I'm going to spoil. All right. And now comes the time where I show you the app. I am going to go here. So I should have received a mail saying that I was invited to testing a mobile app. And I am going to show you. All right. So this is Belgium Meetup, viewing test flights. Install. So this is not local development. I mean, you could share this to anyone in the world. It's not because my computer is here that my app is there actually. So open, and here we have it. So Flutter with Codika is just, this is the basic counter app. And if we wait just a little bit more for CodeMagic to finish the build of, oh, it did, so it's perfect. With Shorebird, how it works, and now I can explain you what I think I know about Shorebird, because it seems to be really technical. But basically, it wraps the build of your app with a tool that when you launch it, will check on a server if there are updates available for the app. And every time you launch your mobile app, it's going to ask the server, is there a new patch available? If yes, it downloads it. And the next time you launch your app, it installs it on the app, and so you have the new version available. And this bypasses completely the App Store verification team. So if you have an app in production, well, you're able to send modifications directly without verifying it again. So how it works is I just delete the app, kill the app, I go back, and as we can see, so that's cursor fucked up here. Oh, sorry, you don't see it anymore. Oh. Too bad. You didn't have the wow effect. But so here it added the other counter, so here I can say plus, and here I can say minus. But cursor fucked up with this emoji instead. If I had the app running locally, I could have seen it, but I didn't. I trusted him, and he failed me. I could, well, actually, this one comes from CodePush, so I could fix it with CodePush. If you want, I can do it now, and so later when we talk, I can show you it works. But okay, so I'm kind of relieved because every demo went pretty well. Okay, so this is the final part of the presentation. For who is Codika? Codika is for basically every Flutter dev that want just improve their Flutter experience by automating their repetitive tasks. It's for agencies that, just as the company where we are, A.C.A, sorry, if I pronounce it bad, but A.C.A, sorry, that want to streamline the production of mobile apps, we make it just easier. It's for freelancers, for indie developers that want to have quick CI/CD pipelines also. This is more for the Codika CLI, because when I talked about this project to other developers, the thing they didn't like was us to have an opinionated architecture. So a lot of people don't use block, a lot of people don't use autoroute, and it was difficult to force this to users. So this is why we automated the creation of custom projects. But the Codika component library, I would say it's more for startups, companies that want to really quickly have professional apps, and we provide some documentation about how to getting started and how each block works. No, it's a lie. The documentation for how each block works isn't done, but the configuration is done. But it's a lot of work, so it's going to come in the months to come. All right, what's next for Codika? This is where AI enters. The first thing that's really obvious is we want to add server pod and Supabase integration because it's just better than Firebase. I mean, I could say this, but it's cheaper at least. We want to add AI automations. This is the biggest one we're working on currently. We have AI engineers that work on this to create lang graph systems where we have automatic Flutter version and packages update. So your app could be able to automatically update itself to the latest Flutter version and the packages. And this works well with the Codika components because if a human does it once, well, we can replicate the logic behind doing it in every project because the architecture is predefined. So it's not difficult at all, actually. We want to add languages using AI. We want to create abstract data type and data transfer objects on the fly using natural language. So those are all tools we are working now. They're not production ready yet, but they are going to be in the year. And voila. The difficult part is develop the community, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I count on you. This year, I'm going to launch the Friday App Challenge with our CI/CD pipeline that goes really fast. We are going to create an app in a day, and so every 2 weeks, a Friday, we are going to post an app challenge, and we want the community to take part in it and replicate their own versions of that concept. So yeah, we're not talking about replicating Facebook and stuff, but of course it's like small indie dev things. And the end goal also of Codika is to provide some work for developers that don't find any work by having some sort of marketplace. We strongly believe there is a shift in how people work. People more and more want to become freelancers. I think, I mean, maybe I'm biased because I am one. It's totally possible. But the idea is to have a marketplace, kind of marketplace, where we have certified developers that we know are good, that could be work on client projects. And with a standardized architecture, it's easy to change products from people to people because they understand how the project works. All right. The tool is available. We have a Discord, so if you want to get access to it, you can just ask us on the Discord channel. Last time I did this lightning talk here, it was not here, it was in Leuven, but where I showed how we handled API keys. So if you ask me, I'm going to give you an API key and you can directly, again, you're a tech nerd, so let's fucking do it. So Codika configure. Here we have some environment variables globally on your computer. And basically you just say Codika configure, add the Codika API key, and well, you're ready to start using the tool. Oops. We have clean documentation. I can show you also. Codika docs. It will launch the documentation here. We have our documentation. If you are familiar with Claude from Antwerp, we completely copied their interface because it's just nice. So yes, you can get started here, configuring your first application. We provide a lot of explanations and some video that were recorded but are still in processing to be put on inside the documentation. All right, and I think that was it. Thank you very much for your attention. And if there are questions, of course, I would love to answer them. Yes, he was the first one again.
Well, first of all, it was amazing. I mean, it was really impressive how well you know this product, and it was really nice. I think first recommendation is in pipeline, if you're able to just throw screenshots and then create widgets, that would be amazing also, and also describe the navigation between screens. I think Canvas has a plugin that can do this, so I think there's something out there that's all to do. I think that's really, really nice.
Thank you. And my second question to you is, as we see more and more, the development goes through automation, and so, in your opinion, how do you see the Flutter developer of the future, considering that a big chunk of the work is now not needed, right? How would you see a Flutter developer? What will he mostly focus on?
Okay, so it's I'm first going to respond to the first question, which wasn't really a question, but so you talk about creating automatically UIs based on pictures. This is a side project we have on Codika, is to go from Figma to Flutter app, but a really functional Flutter app. Nice. And so it kind of joins what you're saying, where you would basically have a fully automated from design to production. But it's more complex than we think. There is Flanva, I don't know if someone knows it here, which does he's talked at Berlin at the FlutterCon. They go from Figma to Flutter code, but it's purely visual, so there isn't all the logic behind it. But it's a good project and a good guy behind it also. And for the other one, I cannot take I mean, it's just my opinion, because I'm nobody in the business, but it's a difficult question. I think the work of developers generally is going to change, that's for sure. There's no doubt about it. I think and again, it's my opinion, it's going to be more about conceptualizing ideas and explaining them and then actually coding them. But So I think the work of a programmer is going to go from coding lines to explaining the lines he wants to code. And we already see it now with Cursor and other AI tools. That's exactly what we have. And the better you are at explaining what you want, the better the result is actually. There will inevitably be less programmers than today, just because there is less work to do. It's sad, but I think that's just how it goes. And that's also where we try to take a place here. I talked about the marketplace of developers. Well, we are trying to take this wave where the work itself changes by having a hybrid version between automations and users. So the transition isn't going to be in one time. It's going to take a long time before we have real automations that can create entire apps or entire websites. And so during a long period of time, we will have a hybrid between automations, which are going to be really simple, but at some point, developers are going to have to take some part of the job. And I think big agencies of tomorrow are a hybrid between AI and human intervention. So that's where we're trying to position ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just have one last question. Is there an AOM model you recommend for Flutter?
Sorry?
Is there like an AI model you recommend for Flutter?
DeepSeek? No. No. I personally use Cloud because it works really well, but I know GPT-O works really well too. And it's a question, if you ask it to me like in a month, it's going to be different. So I think you just need to pick one that works for you, and yeah.
All right, thanks.
I think you were the second. You have the mic, sorry.
Question from the live stream, actually.
First question from the live stream.
First question from the live stream. Well done. How do you manage the dependencies how do you manage the version of your dependencies with the version of Flutter?
The version of my dependencies inside the Dart CLI?
Inside your projects, I think, that you're working on.
When a new release from Flutter comes, then how you change?
That's why we use FVM, basically. So inside the project, I mean, if you understood the question another way than me, tell me, but...
No, I think that's...
Okay, so then I need to look to the camera. So inside every project, it's too weird, I have to talk to the camera. So inside each project, we force FVM, I can show you here. We force FVM to be at currently 3.27.2. So if you have a new version of Flutter on your computer or globally, well, your project isn't going to be affected by this. And if you work with multiple projects, if you're not like a startup that just has one, well, you have to use FVM because it's just easier and you don't lose hair trying to fix every project at the same time.
And how do you then update the dependencies?
Currently, it's not automatic. So currently, if I, as a user of Codika, am creating a project, well, once it's started, once the boilerplate, I would say, is done, well, basically, it's your project. So it's your responsibility to do it. But as I said, in our AI roadmap, this is something we want to automate because we think it's really easy to do, actually.
I think you have a really cool project, a really cool product. Indeed, you know it pretty well. But a question that I have indeed is related to maybe what was asked in the live stream. So right now, it's basically used for setting up your project. And when it's done, it's completely your own responsibility. But for startups, for example, who want to deliver a single app, they will use the Codika CLI only once. Is there a plan to also have it updatable in the future, for example? If you have new features that you want to add, that it's also compatible but of course it makes it quite hard to
Yes.
maintain.
It's not really a question for now yet, because we have other focus currently, but it's clearly something we need to think about. It's more complex than what we think, because if someone creates a project now, maybe tomorrow I create a new Codika version, then the day after someone creates a project, and if in a month I have a new feature, for example, that adds some crazy analytics, well, I need to manage the changes for both versions, and they weren't created with the same version of Codika. So it's way more complex than what we think, and one of the solutions is actually going through this, because if we can ensure that your app is always up to date with the latest version, well, then we know that our entire pool of mobile apps can be updated in the same way, because we know they are on the latest version. But it's not something we do currently. And it's something we will have to do, because the problem is if someone pays to use the CLI, well, the day after he cancels the subscription because the boilerplate is done, and then he doesn't use us anymore. But yeah, I guess it's like that.
Really, really cool.
All right.
No more questions?
I'll drink a glass of wine there, so if you want to talk to. Thank you very much for your attention.